So as you all know, I've recently been building a product in full stack Golang with HTMX and some other fun stuff. And I've done a live stream on that recently, and I just wanted to go over kind of how I've structured my project, as I know a lot of people have asked that question, especially with the HTMX stuff. So firstly, this is the service repo here. And kind of what I'm going to be covering is kind of how I've structured stuff like this. So this is all HTMX, kind of editing a form, all your CRUD application stuff, kind of adding stuff, kind of how I've structured endpoints so that if I ever need to expose a JSON API, I can do that. If I ever need to just render HTMX files, template files, I can do that. And kind of how my approach has been for all that stuff, right? You have to excuse me as well. I've got a bit of a croaky voice, a little bit of a sore throat and stuff. But yeah, let's jump into it. So I currently have all of my kind of business logic, database implementations in kind of an internal package, and then I have all of my kind of adapter stuff for my HTTP application in this API package, right? So first of all of my components and everything are in this web folder. And as you'll see here, everything that starts with com is what I class as a component. So for example, you've got the experience item here. So this is kind of rendering an item. And you notice here, all this stuff is using HTMX. So I've got kind of my hx delete attributes, my get attributes, and all that fun stuff on the elements here. Now, I've kind of been following a little bit of a pattern where I've been following kind of REST URLs to a certain extent where I can, and I've decided that any kind of endpoints that return partial HTML template files, I have behind a API prefix. So these ones here kind of do the operation like a delete or an update or a post, and then I just return obviously the partial that I need to return instead of the JSON blob, right? So that's kind of how I think of HTMX applications, kind of full stack Go apps. I think of it as same as REST, kind of JSON APIs, but you're just not returning JSON, you're returning obviously markup. So yeah, as you'll see here, I've got kind of my basic HTMX attributes on this stuff, and then obviously these are all swapped out based on if you edit, you'll get the edit component rendered where you'll get the form. So that's what I just showed you on the UI a second ago. And again, you have like your cancel button, which again, we'll just go and get the experience item again, replace it and replace the form with the item. And then obviously the form itself makes a patch request to, again, following kind of your REST URL patterns to go and update that experience item. So that's all fun stuff. But let's get on to kind of the actual HTTP structuring of stuff. So the basic stuff I kind of have this API folder here, which has like my repos in it, services all injected into this API struct. And then I kind of have this whole API struct, which is a little bit messy, needs a little bit tidying up. Starting servers, that kind of fun stuff. And then I have all of the kind of endpoints pages in this roots one here, right? So, for example, the engineer pages we just looked at are all obviously in this engineer.roots thing. And all of them are in this handler package here. Now, a handler, all of these are what I consider handlers, right? And they all get this handler struct. So this is just stuff that they might need to use, like the core services, the repos obviously go and get data. Although these repos here do not have the write, they can't write to the database, right? Because that's kind of core business logic. So they're all in the core. So these repos, like I was saying, are just readers, right? So these are engineer.readers. So these are reader repo implementations. So I can get data if I need it. But again, I can't write any. They have to go through the core, which is in internal application, engineer, and then all these commands here are the actual kind of core logic on adding experience, creating an engineer profile, editing experience, and that fun stuff, right? So yeah, let's jump into the handler engineer one. So this is kind of what it looks like. There's some mismatch with the naming of endpoints at the moment, but I'm going to fix that stuff up as well and tidy it up. You have to remember, guys, this is a side project for me. So kind of any code I write is in the evenings after working, and obviously fatigue comes into it and you start doing stupid stuff, right? But anyway, So yeah, you'll see here like all these API ones here will return a partial, and how I do that is I have a helper function on the handler that's passed in, which goes and renders a component. So it just tries to go and exec a template file, and I only actually have the template files in memory of components, right? The other ones are just kind of pages that Fiber, the framework, renders itself. So yeah, this will just go and execute the component partial that can be returned. So you'll notice here, like the get experience item one has access to the engineer reader part of the repo, so it can go and get the experience item straight away and just pass that through to a component and render that. Patch obviously has a lot of business logic in it. So that goes through the experience command, the actual core business logic experience command. But this repo method, I do need to remove. That was just kind of a hacky thing I added in at first. But anyway, you'll notice here that it does like all your usual kind of API stuff, right? I go and get the user logger from the context, that fun stuff. And then again, I'm just rendering out the updated experience item, which then is obviously replaced in the screen in the markup via HTMX, right? So in short, I've kind of got all of my handlers separated into kind of different packages here. I have a bunch of helper methods, so like making sure that certain error messages aren't rendered to the web page. I don't want them to be rendered, like database errors, things like that, right? Obviously, you want to hide those all behind nice error messages, and kind of as the application grows, these cases here probably grow quite a lot. There'll be other types of errors that I want to display. And again, like I was saying, all of these ones here are just helper methods to like render templates, get the logger, get the user, that fun stuff, right? So the actual pages itself, if I go to engineer, the actual pages themselves just use the Fiber framework. So if I go to like the get dashboard page, this is just using, this is basically using c.render, which is a Fiber method on the context. But again, I've got some helpers in here, like checking flash data to see if there's any errors set. And also I have some default view data that I pass in to every template file. So every template file gets access to which features are enabled, naming of endpoints, the app name and the app title, which are all set in app.go here. So like the application is Go for Hunt, and obviously the title is Pairing Talented Go Engineers with Great Companies, right? That's the idea behind the application. Yeah, so all those helpers work great. And again, like I was saying, kind of these pages return the render the whole page, and then the actual kind of API endpoint logic actually renders the partial components, right? So like I say, all of the pages, all the endpoints are in the handler thing here. I've got some other useful stuff like making sure like only certain engineers can edit their own profile, which is passed into core business logic. Certain other packages like setting cookies, obviously all that fun stuff. Other utility functions like functions I actually use throughout the Go application on the UI side, because you can actually pass functions to your UI. So like escaping strings with component data, slice, substring. Again, this is all stuff that will grow and I'll use kind of as the application gets bigger. Obviously, you can set up all your middlewares in here as well. But I think the main thing people probably care about really is just kind of how I set up the endpoints and kind of the thought process. So because I've got all of my core logic in this internal package, obviously I can go and import that into endpoints that just need to return JSON. So I think one of the concerns that people have with HTMX applications is that you're coupling your UI with your backend, which is something people obviously removed with like headless applications that call through to a backend from a front end, like with your React and your Vue, your Svelte, all that fun stuff, right? With JavaScript, basically. But that isn't necessarily a problem. It all depends how you architect your system, your application. As long as you have your core away from your business logic, away from your endpoints, so they're not in your actual HTTP layer, your transport layer, then you can quite easily take your core and send it throughout different endpoints and just import it and call the functions, right? Like this add experience method here, I can just plug into any JSON API or any other kind of application and it will work fine, right? It's not just specific to my UI, which is the main thing I was getting to there. So yeah, I think that's kind of an overview, guys. Again, like the recruiter stuff, all following kind of REST. So this kind of get engineer profile, we'll just go and actually render the profile page with the profile passed into it. And that's kind of it, really. As for the HTMX stuff, maybe I can make some more in-depth tutorials on them, but it's all really simple stuff, guys. It's like, think of your JSON API, but just think of it as markup, and think of the HTMX attributes as just swapping and putting other HTMX in. There's one thing I'll very quickly show off, just because I thought it was really cool. If I go to web view and then I go down to the sidebar, the HX boost attribute is awesome, right? So I want to change the page on render. So like on when you click on, that one doesn't exist. That's a good start. So like clicking on details here and clicking on experience obviously changes a whole form section here, but it doesn't make a whole request, a whole page refresh, right? This is actually client side, and that's what HX boost does. So it means I don't have to do a whole refresh. It's quite cool. Anyway, I thought that was quite cool. I've like, it worked really nicely for that. But anyway, that is how I've roughly structured the HTMX application here. Hopefully you'll get more of an understanding from like live streams and stuff that I do, and also just other tutorials. This is very much a broad overview of kind of how you might architect a HTMX full stack application in Go. Yeah, hopefully you got some value from it. Drop a like if you did. Please subscribe. I really want to try and hit 2,500 subscribers in January. That's the goal. And I'll see you all later on.